Welcome to this easy t-shirt dress tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to use a knit fabric to make a super comfortable t-shirt dress that you can wear to pretty much anything, and it will make your life better in every way. The first step is to make the pattern pieces. This dress only requires 3, and we are using a grown-on sleeve design, so that means that there's not a separate sleeve piece. If you don't have a t-shirt like this, just make sure you round the underarm area of another shirt, kind of like this pattern piece, and you'll be fine. Now if you do it straight, that'll be a bodycon dress. I like to angle out the side to make it more of a swing dress. The more I angle it out, the fuller the skirt is at the bottom, but you do need to make sure that you curve up the hem as you angle it out. I'm marking that this is going to be cut on the center fold, that the stretch needs to go across your body, and that this is the front piece. Once I'm ready to go, I go ahead and I cut it out. I am using wrapping paper for this project, so it cuts very easily, which is a bonus. And it also has a grid on it. I don't think you can see it, but it has an inch by inch grid that makes cutting straight easy for other projects as well. To make the back, I go ahead and place the front on top of the wrapping paper and I trace it. From this angle, you can see the curve of the hem a little bit better. The only difference between the front and the back for me is that I like the back neckline to be a little bit higher than the front. So if you look closely right about now, you'll see that I draw that neckline a little bit higher in the back. Again, I'm labeling that we're cutting it on the fold, that the stretch needs to go across your body, and that it's the back piece. Because the back and the front are so similar looking, it's nice to have it labeled. It just helps you stay a little bit more organized and to know what you need to cut and what you haven't cut yet, that sort of thing. As I finish cutting this out, I'm going to go ahead and measure the back neckline and the front neckline. I'm going to multiply each of those by 2 to get the full length of the neckline, and that will help me cut the neckband. So I add those together and then I subtract 2 inches because I want the neckline to be a little bit smaller so it will kind of hold it in. So the neckband I measured was about 22 inches. Later on, when I actually attached the neckband, I discovered I needed it to be a little bit less long, so a little bit shorter. So it ended up being about 21 or 20 inches. But here I'm cutting that neckband. At this point, it's 2 inches by 22 inches. And I love wrapping paper because these will all roll up neatly on each other. These are the 3 pieces when they're done. Once you've got those done, you're ready to cut your fabric. Now for my fabric, I prefer to use a rotary cutter. It's a lot smoother. It kind of prevents you getting those jagged lines you get sometimes when you have scissors in between each cut when you're opening and closing the scissors. And it also works great on knits. Both the cutting mats and the rotary cutter I'm using are from Ulfa, and you can get them at JOANN. And I use weights. Those little metal discs are from the Home Depot. They just put a little weight on the pattern to keep it from moving around. And I've spent a long time folding the knit fabric in half and making sure that there's no wrinkles before I cut it out. Now, that one issue I had with my neckline is I didn't have my curved ruler to help me curve it. It ended up like a V-neck, so here I'm just trying to round it out just a little bit more, and then I fold it in half to make sure it's even. The last thing I need to cut is my neckband, and that was super easy to cut. Make sure that you have the stretch going lengthwise with the neckband. Now to begin sewing, we're going to put the right sides of the front and the back pieces together, and then you can pin or clip them together. I prefer to use my clips. The Wonder Clips by Clover are fantastic. They just keep the fabric from moving around a lot, and they're super quick and easy to take on and off. So you're going to sew each shoulder seam and then down from the underarm down to the bottom of the hem. Let's go ahead and begin sewing. Now most of the time when you sew with knits, you want to use a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch. But because the sides and the shoulder seams aren't going to have a lot of wear and tear, I go ahead and I just use a straight stitch for this part. But I am using a ballpoint needle, and that makes a huge difference because see, look how nicely that seam is. It's nice and flat. If you use a universal needle, it'll end up puckering and skipping stitches. To hem the sleeves, I just rolled it in about 1 inch, and then I did use a zigzag stitch here because you don't want it to, put it on and have your arms pop open your seams because you used a straight stitch. So use a zigzag stitch, but don't stretch your fabric as it's going through the machine. Try to keep it nice and flat. The one mistake I made is that I sewed a little bit too far away from the raw edge, so I ended up having to trim it. You can see right here I'm trimming that. If you sew a little bit closer to that raw edge, you won't need to trim the extra fabric. It'll just look great as is. But the seam looks beautiful, or the hem I should say, and it has a beautiful stretch to it as well. Now the neckband is the hardest part of this project, but you can totally do it. Just believe in yourself. What you need to do is fold it in half lengthwise and then just sew down the end. And like I said, later I ended up sewing a little bit further over to make it more narrow. So I folded it in half and I ironed it, and then I marked the quarters, so each quarter piece with a clip on the neck hole and on the neckband, because the neckband is a little bit shorter than the neck hole. This helps me know how much I need to stretch it as I'm sewing. So I go ahead and I just mark it so that each quarter is aligned, and then I'm going to sew it with the right sides together and the raw ends towards the machine. I always start with a basting stitch, meaning I use the longest stitch length on my machine, and I use a straight stitch so I can test out the fit of it before I commit to it using like a zigzag stitch or a serger. So when I flip that over though, you'll see that it makes a really nice clean looking neckband. The problem though, like I mentioned earlier, I cut it a little bit too wide. So I go ahead and or too long. So I took it in and fixed it, and I'll show you the end result later. To hem the dress, I just flipped it up and I sewed a straight stitch again. Because it's so full, it's not going to be stretching. If you do have it more of a bodycon dress style, you will want a stretch stitch for this. And I did serge the raw ends. You don't need to do that. I just did it because I like the way it looks, but it won't fray if you don't do it. So here is the finished project. After I fixed my neckband, I did do a zigzag stitch right on top of the seam, and I did serge the inside to make it look really good, but again, you don't need to do that. It won't fray either way. Here's the sleeves, and you can see that when I trimmed the raw edges inside, it made it look really good. And it is done. So this is what it looks like on. I'd like to thank my 7-year-old for filming this for me as I almost trip on my face on those rocks. But it's super comfortable. If you throw a belt on it, it makes it very flattering as well, and you can pretty much wear it to anything. It's a great dress. It's a great project for beginners. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and leave them below, and feel free to subscribe and follow along. My handle is @KaraMetta. Thank you guys.